Hello everybody, this is James Shore with another test-driven development video. What I'd like to do today is start out by creating a scratch pad. Normally when I work I keep a note card of the things I'm doing, but you can't see that. So what I want to do here is just create a scratch card. So the things that I want to do are, I really like this yearly focus, so I want to change savings account to something like savings account year. I also want to put a yearly balance or approach the year differently. So I want to have an ending balance, perhaps other things. And I also want to do capital gains. I'm hoping we can get to that before the end of this session, but we'll see how that goes. Which reminds me, I need to start a timer. So we need to, I want to get to capital gains. Let's start out with a really simple one. We'll just rename this to savings account year to better reflect what's going on. And same thing here. In case you were wondering, the reason I like putting a underscore in front of my test names is because it causes them to all sort to the top. It's just a cheesy little technique. Some people like to put their tests in a different package or a different folder, but I like having them right next to my production code, but not intermixed with them. So I use an underscore to cause them to all sort to the top. All right, so there's our savings account year. Now, one thing that we have here, we have this deposit withdrawal idea, and for long-term projections, I don't really know if that's what we want. I think what we're going to have is some sort of transferring money between accounts. So I'm going to add that to the scratch pad. Deposit withdrawal with. But I'm going to leave it like it is for now. And then the other thing is I think I want to have an ending balance. So if this object, if a savings account year represents 1 year, then the ending balance should be the balance of that account at the end of the year. And that, of course, should match the balance at the account at the beginning of the year. I'm doing this because it matches the way I did it in my spreadsheet, which gives me a nice visualization of what's going on. And in the future, fairly soon, I think, when we put a UI on this, I think I'm going to want to reflect that. I'm going to want to be able to see what's going on inside of each of these accounts so I can review it as I'm looking at my finances. So ending balance should behave fairly similarly to next year. This is going to require some changing some things. So right now we have this idea that a savings account, well, when it was a savings account we assumed it always started with 0, but now that's a savings account year, I think we want to start it with a particular amount of money in it. And I think we also have to make an assumption about the interest rates that it receives. So, and there's our primitive obsession again. This is a currency, this is an interest rate. We really need to make classes around that, I think. Well, let's see. So we start with 10,000 with an interest rate of 10, which means that I would expect our ending balance to be 11,000. Okay, so that's sort of describing a direction for this. I'm not sure how that's all going to interact, but I'm going to go ahead and code this up and then we're factor. So let's just make a note. Factor savings account here to we're going to want to reconcile the next year approach with the ending balance approach. Okay, so we'll need a constructor here. Which of course is going to cause everything else to break. think we're going to want to get rid of that old constructor. Okay, I'm expecting everything to pass except for ending balance. And it did. Good. So we want to make this pass. Yeah, that primitive obsession is getting really obvious. And here we can see the conflict between the old approach and the new approach, but I'm going to keep it for now. And here, we need to do the exact same calculation that we have here. By the way, I think the reason it didn't work last time is because of some sort of interaction between floats and integers and rounding and so forth. I'm not going to try to figure that out because that's also a consequence of my primitive obsession. I think this will work. It did. Great. Okay, so now we've got that working. Now we need to figure out what we want to do with next year. And we need to get rid of this stuff here. You know, I think I want to take out the balance and or the deposit and withdrawal. That was sort of a I don't know what to do, let's just get this thing started step. And now that I'm starting to get more of a handle on this, I'm not as interested in it. Of course, that is going to break my next year test. Let's take this out too. We don't care about negative balances right now. We're not going to do transfers at all for a little while. So what I can do then is next year should assert, let's rewrite this. So we're going to say savings account year account equals new. Yes, I realize that I just retyped the exact same line that I already had. I actually do that quite a bit. When I'm thinking, I find that just moving my fingers helps me figure out what I want to do. So we're going to say it starts with 10,000, has an interest rate of 10, and the next year balance, next year's starting balance should equal this year's ending balance. So that does mean that we'll need a starting balance. And we're going to want to assert that the next year ending balance is equal to, or this year's ending balance is equal to next year's starting balance. That reads pretty nicely. And let's move this down here because I think it makes more sense there. Now, it's not working because next year has a parameter. Take that out. Well, this should fail. Oh, for more reasons than one, I don't have a starting balance. Okay, expected 11,000 but was 0. That was kind of a long period of a lot of stuff to do without a passing test, so I think I overstepped my bounds a little bit there. Next time I'll try to take it in smaller steps. All right, so starting balance, you know what, let's put this aside for a moment and write the code for starting balance. And we just want starting balance to directly reflect whatever we tell it. this. That's going to fail because we've just got stub code in there. But if we return balance here, oops, that comes up in the Mac whenever you hit Apple F5, and in Eclipse, Apple F6 is change window. So I get that a lot. Anyway, there we've got our starting balance working. Good. Let's rename this variable here to starting balance. And let's move it up a little bit. Okay. Everything's working. Good. Now let's bring this one back in. Oh, it's working now. Interesting. Probably because we're passing in, yeah, we're passing in the interest rate, and that's being saved, and it's just redoing this calculation. But now I think I can change this to say that our new year is going to start with our ending balance. Let's make that really explicit. And our interest rate. Cool beans. Actually, let's set that to 0 because we didn't tell it. We didn't test anything about what our interest rate should be, so I don't want to make any assumptions. Okay, and we'll need to return that. There. Great. Okay, so our tests are passing. This is going to be this year. This year dot ending balance is equal to next year starting balance. I love it. Okay, now what do we want to do about that interest rate? Now I know from my previous work in the spreadsheet that in the future I want the interest rate to change over time. Basically, the closer you get to retirement, the less your interest rate is going to be because you're going to move into more and more conservative investment strategies. So we can't just assume that next year's interest rate is going to be the same as this year's interest rate. But that's looking ahead a little bit further than I want to do. I am going to use incremental design and architecture on this. And to start with, I want to just keep this really simple. So let's assume that next year's interest rate is going to equal this year's interest rate. It's good enough for now. Well, next year's interest rate equals this year's interest rate. But it does expose what's perhaps a smell here in the design. Yeah, actually, let's not do that. I think that just makes too many assumptions. You know, before we had an interest rate for next year. Well, I think I'm thinking ahead too much. Let's go ahead and do what I said originally. We'll just have next year's interest rate equal this year's interest rate. And we'll fix it as we learn more. Okay, let's create that interest rate method. And it's going to be int. And it's simply going to be interest rate. This year dot next year. Okay, that should work. No, it's not going to work because I've got it hard-coded to a 0. But as soon as I put in the interest rate here in the constructor, that should work. All right.